Welcome to the Turnpike Sports Spotlight. Dave Weishaupt with you. I am fascinated by the sports media and entertainment industry, mostly because it's constantly changing and evolving. And there is one company out there that is doing incredible things in the industry, whether it be radio, TV, and everything else out there. The name of the company is BLEAV, and I think it's one of the unique organizations in this industry. And to hear more about it, we have BLEAV's founder and CEO, Bron Heussenstamm. Bron, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be on with you guys. I really enjoyed the show.
Oh, we love what you guys are doing, too. And I actually went to your website, which is BLEAV.com, and that's BLEAV.com, so people playing at home. And I was absolutely amazed at what you guys are doing in the industry. I mean, for people who aren't familiar with BLEAV, tell us something about it, because I think it's really a game changer in the sports media and entertainment industry.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And look, we thought the same thing when we started this. So the background on it was I had an agency and I was just looking for 2 spots for my clients, specifically Ryan Leaf. This is about 5 years ago, to jump into the podcast industry. I just saw it coming, right? Like Twitter, Instagram. Hey, you're an athlete. This is an RSS feed. It's part of your new media career. If you want to get into this or if you want to be a part of it, like, let's get started now. Mm-hmm. And called around, and there really wasn't a spot for professional athletes and, entertainers to say, like, hey, I'm new, I'm putting my hand up and I want to get into this space. Where do we go? And from a manager's perspective, that became my job. So here I am calling around looking for something that really didn't exist. And so we just kind of put 2 and 2 together. I said, hey, Ryan, look, I'm going to start a brand. It's going to make it look like you've signed with somebody. We'll put a couple other people on there and maybe I can sell an ad across the whole network, or, I can hire one person to help. And that's what we did, and we put it out to the public, and we got a lot of other athletes interested. And so now, 4 years after launch, we got about 175 athletes on the program and about 800 creators. So we really filled that gap between, established host and I'm just jumping in, and now they can go to BLEAV.
One of the great things about BLEAV is we've had a lot of people in the industry come on our show, and, they come on and say, you know what, our platform or our site has something for everyone. But, when I look at BLEAV, you actually do have something for everyone. I mean, not only do you sports program, but you have also pop culture programming, which is a great concept because a lot of the time the audience for sports and pop culture overlap. Tell me how many shows BLEAV has in production right now.
We do about 100 shows a day. We've
Wow.
done over 80,000 episodes to date. So it's a lot, and we wanted it to be a lot. The plan for us strategically was, if you're a fan of something, a passionate fan, I wanted an expert of that topic to be able to relate and speak to you. So you jump in your car and you say, hey, Siri, play BLEAV in Dodgers. Hey, Siri, play BLEAV in The Bachelor, and have those passionate fan-based topics and let them overlap. So we did some simple research on, if there's a list that's already been created on Google, what are the most popular topics in the United States in sports and pop culture, in fandom. It's about 800, that's the Dodgers to Harry Potter, and we want a show for all of them. And so that's what we've set out to create. We'll be the first network with a former player for every team in the United States, and we want to take that over. So you're not going to find a former player unless it's an actor of something like Harry Potter, but like having an expert in a topic space with a fandom is the ethos of the business.
When we started doing radio, I think it was like 2007, it was pretty simple. I mean, we walked into a radio booth and did the show, and it broadcast over the radio. So that was simple, nothing more to think about. But since then, the sports media industry has changed so much. So many more distribution methods have been created for shows since when we first started. How is BLEAV keeping pace with that constantly changing sports media industry when it comes to the distribution of shows?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, we're trying to be a leader in that space. It's very hard to grow organic podcast downloads. Yeah. And frankly, it's very hard to sell ads. And I joke about this all the time. It's, you dive in and you're like, hey, I'll get to, 10,000 downloads and that'll be easy to sell. And then you look around the room and you're like, the other companies are doing 100 million. Who's going to buy, my 10,000? And you need to build it up from there. So I've always been enamored with the studio aspect. Our business is, from Hollywood. I lived in West Hollywood for 15 years. That's something that we jumped into with, very strategic knowledge of the space, and really looked at it and said, well, look, if I've got a piece of content from a professional athlete, be it a 30-second clip or a 30-minute show, where else can I take it? Am I just driving audience to an audio podcast, or am I driving it to a YouTube, or am I then taking the two of those and bringing them to radio? We just started with Sports Illustrated this week in the written form. We've got 10 shows on other networks. We've got 2 television stations. We've got 3 radio stations. So it's once we have that, we want a 360-degree distribution, because for us, when somebody says something that's great, we want it to be heard. And I don't think that there's a model that works to say, like, hey, come to my platform and hear my thing, especially in audio where it's so mutually exclusive. You want to take that content to where the fans already are.
Tell us about the rise of the athlete podcast, because I always love having athletes on this show because they give such a different perspective of whatever they're talking about, either the game or the business behind the game. Tell us about the athlete podcast and how it has grown, and how many hosts you have as former athletes.
Yeah, it's a big part of the career now. You know, a couple of our hosts joked when we were getting started that, you know, if they would have had this when they played, they would have just not done the press releases, or I mean, the interviews after the game, and just saved it for their podcast, right? And you really see some athletes like Draymond Green, and, you know, they're diving in and really cashing in on that because their words are valuable. So if you looked at it from a, you know, entrepreneurship perspective, like, why are you giving away that value to a third party when you can keep it to yourself and cash in? So for a lot of them, it's about, you know, extending their branding the same way they do in their Twitter or their Instagram. And then it's building their resume. You know, a lot of them picked up a ball when they were 4, 6, 8. They didn't get paid for 14 years later. And luckily it doesn't take that long in the hosting space, but you still have to get in and kind of build that rapport and do those reps. So it's a perfect combination of the two of them, of building up that resume and getting better, but then also if there's revenue there immediately or down the line, you know, you can pull for that too. So we said for it from a management and from an agency perspective, like, everybody should be doing this the same way they have a Twitter and an Instagram. It was just about where to go and who can help, because it's a lot easier to send a tweet than it is to conduct the podcast. And that's really where BLEAV comes in and kind of maximizes that value for the athlete and the entertainer or the pundit as well.
What's really cool is that you have an ex-NFL player, a great running back named Bron Green, and he's doing a show, but it's not about football. He's actually doing it on esports and a gaming show, and it's called Bron Green's Gamers Lounge Podcast. And I met him last year in Atlantic City at a conference, and he is absolutely one of the nicest guys in the world, and I absolutely love his podcast and what he does with gaming. That's what's so great about BLEAV. It's the diversity that you have in your podcast and your products.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, you know, Amon's fantastic, and we want to cater to that too. If an athlete has a different interest, it would be very hard in the model 15 years ago to take an athlete or an entertainer or an expert on one space and then find them a job in a completely different space, right? Because they would probably go for somebody that's already an expert in that. And the rise of the athlete podcast and the ability really for anyone to just jump in and achieve market value on their own is groundbreaking. And look, this is no different than a lot of other industries, right? You can sell clothes directly to customers, and now you can really sell your voice directly to customers. So if you've got a player or an expert in anything that says, like, hey, you know, I have this other interest, I want to show that I can have value there, or maybe I'm just doing it for fun. But we wanted to give that microphone to them where before, you know, there wasn't really that opportunity to have that microphone to talk. And now they have the ability to do it. So Amon's doing fantastic in that space, and so are a lot of other people.
Now, not only have I said you do podcasts and radio shows, but also TV shows, and you distribute to regional sports networks. And over the last couple of years, they have really gone through some changes. What have you seen as some of the changes in the regional sports networks? And since you distribute to those channels, how has BLEAV adapted to the regional sports network as they have changed?
Yeah, it's a great question. The passion of the fans isn't going anywhere, right? If any, fans are getting more passionate. They're getting more information than they've ever received. But there's also a lot of competition in just their awareness and time and what they're focused and interested on. So if you want to say, all right, I've got somebody in Los Angeles and they're a Dodgers fan and I'm going to feed them Dodgers content. Well, they're able to get Dodgers content from Twitter, from Instagram, from TikTok, Dodgers content is falling out of the sky. So 20 years ago, you would have gone to the radio or you would have gone to the television station, and that's no longer the case. So the delivery method across those television stations, and look, it's similar to a lot of radio. Well, it's a business model that worked 20 years ago that has become very expensive based on the revenue return on the eyeballs, because those eyeballs are now being split across so many different distribution sites. So it's not that people don't want to watch the Dodgers games pre or before. It's just that it's expensive to bring them Dodgers content 24/7.
Sure.
So here, BLEAV with 500, unique shows doing 100 episodes a day. If you're have available content from 7 to 10 and you're like, what do we put there? It's now too expensive. Like, we've got that content for you that you can show at a premium, and it's available. And that's what we've done. So with Bally's, we've got 10 shows there. And we've got about 20 shows on other networks, including our own, 2 TV channels, which, do about 10 to 15 new shows per day. We're able to deliver that in a model that makes sense. When the regional networks, it's just expensive, right? You've got TV cameras and studios and hosts and antennas and satellites, and like, that's a lot of expenses versus somebody that can turn their phone around, hit record, and then hit enter and hit all the same people as well.
Speaking to a lot of people in the sports media, I know one of the big changes coming up, and it's going to affect everyone in the sports media, is college football. I mean, teams are leaving conferences. I'm not sure if rivalry games are going to happen in the future. New media contracts will have to be created. And I'm pretty sure these conferences are going to have to rename themselves, because the Pac-12 probably aren't going to have 12 teams in it. So I think big changes are coming. When it comes to sports media, college football, it's one of their big properties. So for media companies and distributors, how is that going to change the way they do business and the way they distribute the product? I mean, the network contracts, will they have to change? Does this mean more streaming distribution? What do you see in the future for college football, especially how it's distributed to the viewing public?
Right. Well, look, it's really the Wild West, right? From the NIL to the distribution to the realignment. I mean, we're seeing things that we would have never, even thought were possible. If you'd have told anybody, 20 years ago that, hey, the Pac-12 will die. Like, no, they're always going to play football out West. How would the Pac-12 die? One of the funniest jokes I've seen about this is somebody said, and obviously it went viral, like, hey, let's take the top 64 teams and then divide them into 4 divisions, and we'll do a West, North, South, and East, and we'll call the West Pac-12, and we'll call the South the Big 12. And you're like, wait a second, that's exactly what we have right now. So how do you then, redistribute all this? And I think a lot of people miss on this, that it is a business, right? There's not a right to play college football. There's not a right to make money from sports. These essentially are all businesses, and they need to be profitable. And not all businesses work, right? The AVP volleyball tour went out of business, and all the players were just like, well, that's it, right? It can happen in a certain sport. So it's from a distribution and a paid standpoint. If you're USC and your offer is $30 million to stay in the Pac-12 or $70 million to go to the Big 10, like, that's how can you not take that, right? Hey, we're going to double our revenue to do the exact same thing. And then from a fan perspective, are you okay with that? Because you've got multiple basically revenue streams, multiple people that you have to keep happy. And then you have all your alumni and the students and everything. So, and that's why you've seen so much craziness. And, SMU is going to the ACC and they're not taking anything. And, Washington and Oregon are only getting half because they came in late. And it's really been a lot about the art of the deal on top of all of it. So it's going to be constantly evolving. What it is right now is not what it was yesterday, and it's going to be completely different tomorrow. I think you will start to see a lot more guide rails on like how this is all working, where the money is going, is it being distributed to the players? But there's just so much to unpack in here. I mean, we could do an entire show just on like, where this is going. But I think to summarize all this is, it's just changing. It's very malleable, and I wouldn't get too frustrated about where it's at now, because it's not even close to where it's going to end. And it's kind of one of those things where it's just be fun to, pull up some popcorn and kind of watch it go. I think one thing for us, though, being out here on the West Coast, is the disaster of the Pac-12 and really just bad ideas, bad leadership, and they died, right? They missed, and it happens, right? No one thought it would be Blockbuster or BlackBerry, or these other businesses that were so established that just didn't see the future coming and missed on their ideas, and it ended. And it's just from everybody involved, it was just devastating. Like, I'm supposed to now cheer for Michigan State to beat somebody. Like, I've been cheering for Washington to beat Michigan State my whole life, and I got to flip that. Like, that's just it's a tough pill to swallow.
Well, I got to ask you. I mean, since this interview started, we've mentioned podcasting, radio, television, streaming, and I certainly think BLEAV's distribution method is certainly cutting edge. Do you think the way you guys do business will eventually be commonplace in the industry? I mean, do you think other companies will see what BLEAV is doing and really embrace that omni-channel approach to distribution when it comes to their media properties?
I do. And I really think that the way we've set it up is the future of the industry. And if I didn't, we would obviously change. You're a startup, you need to be nimble. Like, we're not a Titanic, with 500 shows. You see this is a bunch of jet skis, circling a Titanic. We have to be unique in what we're able to do. As I mentioned in the regional sports network, it's not the fans and it's not the content. It's the delivery mechanism that's too expensive. For us to be able to deliver through a phone or through a computer is essentially free. And you want to have a company that actually is cash flow positive. And you saw with the Silicon Bank collapse is these businesses that say, hey, I'm going to make 8 million by spending 12, and then I'm going to raise 20 million. And then I'm going to make 40 million by spending 50. Like, that's not really a business model that's working today. You have to be cash flow positive. So you can say, like, hey, I'm going to build up a $500 million business by spending 700. No one's going to finance that out of the gate. So how do you come into something like this and say, like, it has to work? Like, all of our hosts, our company, like, we would love advertisements. We love billboards on Sunset Boulevard. Sure. There's no way to your investment on that. So to take a piece of content and minimize the expenses while maximizing the exposure through multiple distribution points is not only the future, it's really the now. And that's something that I think that we're leading the market in outside of, say, maybe Fox and ESPN. And ESPN was the inventor of the car wash, right? You come there, Stephen A. says one thing to you on the interview, and then everybody talks about it all day, right? You do 8 shows. They also have the written. They've got the TV channel. They've got their socials. Like, they do a fantastic job on that. The difference between what we do and what they do, and to put us in ESPN and even the same sentence is a stretch, but ESPN isn't giving their content to third parties, right? You're not seeing ESPN, Stephen A. Smith on Fox. We are on all third parties and our own channels, and it benefits everybody because of the cost structure related to that. And that's something that I think that we'll excel in, and we continue to kind of be a leader, even as a startup in that space.
One of the big types of shows that a lot of media companies are doing now are shows on sports betting and on fantasy sports. I mean, over the last couple of years, sports betting has really exploded across the U.S. I mean, I have a pile of commercials I have to read, and most of them are sports books, which is shocking to me over the years. Do you see more and more media companies creating sports betting shows, and do you think that trend will continue over the coming years, or is it starting to trail off a little bit, or what do you see in the future?
Yeah, it's in the eye of the beholder, right? There always going to be a need for more good content. Just because it's betting content doesn't necessarily mean it's good.
Sure.
So the unique thing I think about betting content versus, traditional sports content is similar to fantasy. Like, you're not going to listen to 9 fantasy shows, right? You're probably going to pull 1 or 2 and they're going to go over all the big things. Similarly, like, you've only got time to listen to, Jim Rome or Colin Cowherd or Dan Patrick and on your drive in the morning from traditional radio. You can't listen to all 3. They're all at the same time, right? So you have to pull, you only have so much time in the day, and the topic is obviously very similar. So how do you, a fan, are they going to listen to the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th betting show? I'm not sure. I think that there'll be more specific betting in the future where it's like, I'm just a Lakers betting expert, over under. And we even had a show like that. And every day the host was like, fade the Lakers. They're the popular team. More people are going to bet on the Lakers. You should bet on the other side. And I laughed and I called the host and I said, like, well, that's not very good content for the Lakers. Like, you can't just come on every day and say bet against the Lakers, right? You have to find that medium where it's it's interesting content, it's fun content, it's entertaining content. And then how does it find people, right? Is it somebody that's just bubbling up on their own and creating their own fan base? Is ESPN making a star? Is Fox making a star? Is BLEAV making a star? And I think you're going to kind of find a lot in this space, and you're going to have to filter it all out, and you'll have a few people that rise up and be known as the person for that, and then you'll have some secondaries. But I think if somebody wants to come into this, and obviously with BLEAV, we're always looking for ways to enter into the market. We have shows, Bet LA, Bet Chicago, that just kind of focus on all the teams in that space. And when the cities are big enough, you've got year-round sports. So it's a great way to connect with the audiences there.
I remember one year we had this weird pick segment for the NFL where we had an astrologer come on every week. And he used to do a chart for all the games, and I was kind of making fun of it, but he was like hitting 62%. But he eventually stopped because other astrologers were pretty angry at him. I guess he was using his ability for evil. So I think that's what he was getting at. So
right. Well, look, most of the sports betting stuff is using your ability for evil, as we've been learning.
Hey, it's 62%, 62%, evil or not. I mean,
right.
Good for him. But I'm curious, how does BLEAV acquire the media properties that they work with? I mean, does BLEAV create its own shows? Does BLEAV accept submissions from people who hear about BLEAV? I'm sure there's a lot of people out there with podcasts or think they have a great idea who may want to get in touch with you. How does BLEAV start working with a media property, and what goes into the choice of media property or show that you work with?
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. And to pull it from, more of a macro business angle is, when Gatorade wants to, do a new drink, do they call it Gatorade? Do they buy somebody? Do they launch a new brand, right? Mm-hmm. When Nike, Jordan, do they just sponsor Jordan? Do they launch the Jordan brand? That's something that we look at the same way as, hey, are we launching a new show? Are we bringing in a new show? Are we finding a host? Are we creating a show around them? Is there a topic that we see a void in? And then we go and look for a host. Sometimes we'll run ads, through something as simple as LinkedIn. We probably had about 50,000 applications through LinkedIn to host with us. So it's just sorting through all of it. Yeah. And then trying to, with a host is, we don't want to sell, false dreams, and we don't want to waste time of the host. We want to maximize their ability. And that's usually something that comes from, number one, what do they want to talk about? Because these podcasts, they start at zero. Yeah. So if they're not excited about the content, they're not going to put in the grind in order to build these things up to a revenue base. And then that doesn't make any sense for us as a business model either. So really working, if you say an Amon Green wants to get over into something out of their territory, is that worth it for us or for any other company to invest in from day one? That just becomes a gamble, right? And that's why you've seen a lot of these podcast companies struggle, because they made big bets on certain hosts and it didn't work. And then others made, small bets on hosts that came out huge. Yeah. And then it just became entertainment. And that's every entertainment industry. You see movies tank all the time. You see TV shows get canceled, and then you see ones that run forever. And so you're looking at it from that entertainment space, and then also from the host perspective, and then really trying to put a lot of smart minds in the same room and saying hey, how are we going to do this, and how do we execute, just to maximize it for everybody involved.
Tell us some of the places where we can see and hear shows that are distributed by BLEAV, because you distribute to some of the biggest places in the industry.
It's a passionate advance to get to those places. So thank you for recognizing that. Sure. We're on 45 platforms now. So some of the bigger ones you can find us at are obviously all the podcast destinations, wherever you get that. YouTube is a big part of what we do. The technology now, especially, a lot of the upgrades that came through COVID with people at home, makes it so easy to record your show. You can do a TV show, from your house. And put it on video. We've got 2 TV channels, predominantly on Fubo, BLEAV and BLEAV Football. Go to TuneIn if you want to hear us on the radio, BLEAV and BLEAV Football there too. We're on Sirius XM for all of our football shows. You can find us on Bally's in Ohio and Los Angeles. And just new this last week, Sports Illustrated, and we've taken our stuff now to written articles. But if you're ever just curious on us, the reason I named it BLEAV was I wanted to own those 5 letters so that when you put us into search in any of these places, then it's us that pops up. So type in BLEAV to wherever you listen to your content, and we should be there. And that's the slogan of the company is, every team, every topic, everywhere, is we want to be everywhere immediately at once when one of our hosts speaks.
So what's in store for BLEAV? Are you working on some things that you can share with us? What should we look forward to in the near future from BLEAV?
Just more. Mm-hmm. More across the board, more topics, more athletes, more pundits, more stars, and more distribution locations. When we have somebody speak, we want it to be everywhere. We just recently got in all the airports. It's like wherever content is consumed, we want it to be there. And so just continue to that. And then, the rise of our shows, you want to talk about, some of the big stars that we've already mentioned, like, having some self-created ones through BLEAV if they've come in here to bring some people to some household names is obviously the goal. And then, again, I always use the word maximize, but that's really what we just try to do is, how do we relieve time, relieve expenses, maximize profitability, maximize fun, maximize entertainment. That's the future of BLEAV.
Bron, we're running out of time, but can you give out a website so people can check out BLEAV? And if you have a social media address, feel free to give that out too.
Sure, BLEAV.com. It's BLEAV. Want gamer tag with it. Like I said, I wanted it to be, you put it anywhere and that letter combination and we'll come up.
Bron Heussenstamm, CEO and founder of BLEAV, thank you so much for coming on and telling us all about BLEAV. Whether it's podcasts, radio shows, television shows, BLEAV has some of the best shows in the sports and entertainment industry, and I urge everyone to check them out. Bron, please come back on and keep us updated about BLEAV. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much as well. It's my pleasure.
That'll do it for us this week. We'll see you next time on The Turnpike.